So today we're taking a look at the Athearn HO Scale Maxi-I Intermodal well car, and it comes in a 5-unit set with 40-foot wells to carry these 40-foot ISO containers such as this Hapag Lloyd, which we're going to take a look at later in the video. Now the Maxi-Is are pretty common to see on intermodal trains. Here's one of them I caught at Fullerton Station when I went to California. And if you look at the side of the car, each of them are labeled B, C, D, E, and A at the end. Now the reason why it's not exactly in order is because a car always needs an A end and a B end. All of this is one car. That's why in the manual it says well car, not well cars. So this is the proper way to arrange it. It's all in alphabetical order except for the A. But anyways, let's get started on car B. Alright, so here is the B car. You're gonna put this at the end of the train. This model is made of plastic, so it's relatively light, although they have some small weights on the end. So because it's all plastic like the Maxi III, I kind of feel like I could just squeeze it in and just crush it with my hand. But this is actually a really detailed model, even though it's ready to roll, not Athearn Genesis. Especially in the front, you can see the bogie straight through the walkway, so that's pretty crazy. It's all see-through etched metal. You can see the steps to go up. There also is some printing on the air reservoir tank. And here's the orange handbrake, very thin. See those chains hanging down. There's also a support pillar holding up these pipes, and tells you to apply the handbrakes on both ends of the car, and says the same thing on the other side. Then we have a McHenry plastic knuckle coupler, which does have a lower shelf. Then we have some stanchions on the ends which are facing outwards. All the cars have it, so I think it's meant to be like that. Then we got a stirrup step and a train line hose. And it's interesting, there is a little lever on top. I don't think I've ever seen that before. We also have this, which I was confused what it was, but it turns out it's a holder for the coupler cut lever, which this car doesn't have. They also have separately applied grab irons. Then down here we have the truck, which is pretty simple. There's no molded in text or rotating bearing caps. This car also has different wheel sizes. The ones on the ends are smaller at 33 inches versus 38 inches in the middle trucks. Then down here we have some train lines, which go across the side of the car. And they're actually a separately applied piece. So from above you can see there is a little gap. So it has some pretty nice realistic shaping, and here it wraps around to the other end. There also is a lot of information text on the side. The B end, it's all pretty legible stenciling. Even further down there's a little sign, remove all debris from well floor before loading containers. We also got these little pockets here. These are guides for the containers to slide in, and inside it's pretty hollow, and there's also holes for the container pegs. And the floor is made up of this lattice structure with the holes in the middle, and there is some molded in rivets. The internal sidewalls also have these circular indents going throughout. Then we got the car number on the side. It's also written again here, and it's also these white markers for the midpoint. It's also interesting that there's these little nubs on that side, but it's smooth on this edge. On the other end, we have some more labeling, talk about how to load the containers, and there's also a ladder with the bottom rung having an angle to it. And they also painted the edge black and says jack here. There also is a square lifting ring hole. Then at the end we have a Jacob's bogie that goes in between cars, and it can swivel like this. And it's interesting that there's this tower piece above it on one side. And there's these little anchor point details which make it look like it's connected, although it's not. There's also some writing, says lift each connection at 4 places. In the middle it says unit B, and there's some piping detail. Then above we have the end walkway platform and the other container guides. And these intermediate trucks can carry 125 tons. In real life they actually have bigger wheels than the end trucks. Then here's a look at the side. And there's yet another tiny label here saying don't lubricate. And then for the rest, a lot of things are similar. But on this side, it says GWG52. That's the AAR classification. Then further on, there is a Gunderson logo built in Oregon. That's some more information. And I guess this is for the AI tag, although I don't see it actually there. There also is a COT stencil, says check the air reservoir, which has the rest of the information. There also is this lifting bracket that sticks out. But yeah, that's about it. Should be notable that this side is smooth, doesn't have that train line hose sticking out like the other side, so that's asymmetrical. Then here is a view of the top. If you look closely at the floor, all these shapes are actually pretty unique. Even the ones on the end, they're kind of bending inwards. Also, I think the reason why that side has those pins on top is because they're holding another train line. So that's a very subtle detail. Here's the top of the truck, and then here's the bottom. The bogies do include brake beams, and here's their range of motion. This is the bottom of the floor. And the other bogie. So next up we have car C, the first intermediate car. So this one's different because it has that hoop for the pin, which will connect to the other car's bogie. It does have the same writing on the end, with the train line wrapping around. There also is this auxiliary valve that pops out. Then it tells you how long the train line is. Then we have the old school TTX logo with the speed lines in black and white, very iconic. Then we have the train line running along the bottom, this time it's singular. Notice they have these bars at the top for protection. Then we have the same details like the other car, but I was surprised in the middle they actually have a train line hose sticking out, which is painted separately. and the interior looks pretty much the same. And then here's a view across the other side. Nothing really changed. And here's a look at the bottom, which I did find interesting that one side of the wheels actually has this plastic insert in it. Apparently these are for insulation so the track doesn't short circuit, and it's only on one end, the other side does not have that. So the other intermediate cars, D and E, are built pretty much the same as car C, but there are little differences on the ends. Car D has this train line hose hanging down, and car E has a curvy wire. They also don't have that auxiliary valve on top. Then the side, they all have different letters. C and E have the same writing, which is much less on car D. Also, the end has different placement for the labels. And car E doesn't have a train line on the side, while car D has 2 lines, which is double the amount on car C. Then on the end, car C and E, they have the same writing, but car E does have that tower piece and auxiliary valve on top. But car D does have additional writing about the release rod and valve, because on top they have an air reservoir tank and this wall with holes in it. There also is a silver guard piece as well. And then for the other side, it's pretty much the same again, just car E has that train line at the bottom, while the other 2 cars are just flat, but there are still some molded in bits that stick out at the bottom. And the underbody of these cars are pretty much the same. Alright, so here is the final section, car A. I was surprised that it's actually near identical to car B. Both ends have that brake wheel, and the pipes running along the side. The only difference is that it says A instead of B, and it doesn't have that bogie, instead there's just that hoop. So that's one of the main differences. Then here's the other side and the bottom. Now in terms of manufacturing, there's actually a little bit of a difference in the print quality. It seems like on car A, there's a little bit of fading here, while it's bolder on car B, and same thing with these texts in the rear. Also, when I got this out of the box, this part was actually coming out a bit, so it wasn't glued properly, and there is this big glue mark on the side, and some pooling in this crevice. Alright, to assemble the train, you simply slide the hoop over the pin. It takes relatively little effort at all, and I can swing it back and forth, and it's very easy to take out as well. It's just held by gravity. Alright, so here it is with all 5 wells, and it's actually a fairly long car. And here is the turning radius range of motion. Definitely a pretty cool train set overall. Now for the Hapag Lloyd 40-foot shipping container, which Athearn included 5 of them, and can fill an entire row of the well car. So Hapag Lloyd is a German shipping company, and comes in this vibrant orange livery, and it's my first Athearn container. So on the front end, we have some hazard markings on top. Because it's a high cube, it needs extra clearance. Then we got the container number, little hole at the bottom, you can see the nice corrugation. There are also holes in the corners for the connectors, with pegs at the bottom. Then in the middle we have the Hapag Lloyd logo, and some more container information at the top, like the height, and it also says IC81, IC for inter-container, and 81 is code for the Austrian Railways, so it's approved there. By the way, all these containers have unique numbers, so that's pretty cool. And then on this end we have the doors, which have these separately applied silver latches. At least for the rods, the door handles are still molded in. And on top we got the hazard stripes, Hapag Lloyd, and all this extra information, including some badges and signs. And you gotta repair with Corten steel only. And there's some certification at the bottom. Then here's the other side, pretty much the same. And then here's the top view, which does have the container numbers on the ends. But then here's a look at the bottom, which does have a little bit of residue. And here's that slot to fit in with truck trailers. And the floor for these are actually fairly level and pretty solid. Usually containers from other brands, this floor is actually flexible and like makes it dip. So this is actually pretty well done by Athearn. Alright, so now stack the containers. So simply insert the peg into these holes. Just like that, it's very easy to snap in. Surprisingly, it's very secure as well, so even if I hang it upside down, it's not going to really fall, unless I put a lot of force into it. Another cool thing about these containers, for these top holes, they actually have real holes so you can see the pegs sliding in through. Usually these would just be molded in. So here's how it looks like with all the Hapag Lloyd containers, just enough to fill one row of it. And these are not that tight, there's a lot of wiggle room, but it's still going to be pretty secure inside. And here it is with double containers. So this is a collection of every single intermodal well car that I have in HO scale. There is a large variety from different brands and they're all pretty unique in their own way. Up until now, every single one of these came from a different brand, except now that I have the Maxi I, that's my second Athearn. The first one was the Maxi III. But for the other ones, we've got the Rapido Husky Stack well car, the Atlas Thraw Triple, the Kato Maxi IV, the Athearn Maxi III, the Scale Trains Backpacker well car, the Intermountain A-line twin stack wheel car, and the first one I ever got, the Walthers mainline throttle rebuilds, and then our latest one, the Athearn Maxi-I. So these wheel cars come in all sorts of designs, but it's mainly split into two categories. One are the 40 footers, which are shorter. So in the front, all these are 40, so 40, 40, 40, 40. Then we have this 48, which is a bit of a transitional phase. Nowadays, it's a pretty uncommon container length. And then these ones are the domestic 53 footers, and they are going to be using these much longer 53-foot containers, which are used in the US, Canada, and Mexico. While internationally, most countries use 40 footers. In the US, we use both. And they're able to connect like this. And that actually plays into the car lengths, so the shorter ones have more units. So you can see this one is 5 units, another 5 units, 5 units, 5 units, and even this one is 5. While the domestic containers usually come in sets of 3, so 3, 3, except the Husky, these are kind of standalone. And again, for the floor, they're all going to be different. The Maxi-I uses this lattice shape, while the other Maxis use X's rather than the zigzag pattern, which is also seen on the twin stack, although theirs is kind of chunky, but they also have the circles in the inner walls, just like the Maxi-I. Now, although this model is really detailed, Athearn put this under their ready-to-roll line instead of Athearn Genesis, I suppose because it doesn't have little details like the coupler cut liver. Other than that, it's pretty high quality with lots of separately applied parts, the see-through etched metal walkway. Compare that with other brands like Walthers mainline, it's all molded in plastic. The A-line's molded in. Scale Trains is one of the higher tier ones, so that is also etched metal, very detailed. And then from Athearn themselves from many years ago, you can see they're using these molded in plastic, not as realistic. Same thing with Kato, they are not see-through, but they are on Atlas, which is etched metal, and same thing on Rapido. Another way to split these cars are what material they're made of. They're either made of plastic or metal. For Rapido, they're made of metal. Atlas, they're like a lightweight plastic. Kato has metal infused. Athearn is plastic. Scale Trains is all metal. A-line is plastic. Walthers is metal. And the latest Athearn is also plastic, but generally metal ones are better because they're heavier and they have good traction without adding containers. In the future though, Athearn is going to produce well cars with metal frames for the Maxi IIs, which is going to be Genesis. Another thing about these Maxi ones, if you go in between, you can see there are separately applied trainline hoses, which I don't think you'll find it on the other brands' models except for Scale Trains, which have them on the very edge. And if you go further down, yep, they don't have them. Now let's compare the other TTX well car from Rapido. You can see they both have that old school TTX Speedlines logo. They also have different shades of yellow. On Rapido, it's a lot duller, while Athearn goes for a brighter yellow. And it's actually an earlier version of the Maxi-I from the 2000s, so that explains why it doesn't have any FRA stripes along the side. But you can see them on Rapido with these white stripes, which were required after 2005. And here you can see it on the Walthers, although it's very subtle because the stripe is also yellow. So that's another way you could tell what era the car is from if it doesn't have it. It means it's kind of old. Alright, so now I want to compare all the Maxi cars. So Maxi-I, Maxi III, Maxi IV. And they all have different lengths. Now for the front ends, they're pretty much built the same way, with the brake wheel, air tank, and walkways. But you can see just the difference between the Athearn, the new versus the old. The older Athearns were pretty simple, everything's molded in and kind of chunky. So they definitely did improve a lot over the years, especially the etched metal walkway. And here it is on Kato, the detail is actually pretty decent. And the Maxi 4s are a bit different because they have this lever mechanism, while the others have walkways on both sides. Another difference on the Maxi 4 and 3 is that they have these long catwalks, which isn't present on the Maxi 1. Another difference on the Maxi 1, the brake lines are running along the outside of the car, while the Maxi 3 and 4 have smooth sides. Instead, they run the brake line on top of the sidewalls, and they have these angular protective covers around them, or they keep the train line in the interior walls. And again, you can just see how much detail the newer Athearns have compared to the old ones, so thick and chunky. Also, another issue with these older Athearn cars is that they're not so easy to detach, so they're kind of stuck together. You have to really twist it around just to get it out. While the newer ones, they just pop out so easily. It's a lot less finicky. Also, the bogies are a little bit different, especially the bearing caps. They actually have different styles. On the Maxi 3, it's a lot more extruded. I just realized this has 2 center springs, but if you go on the other end, that has 3, so they actually changed it per side. While on the old Athearn, they have it 3 on both ends. The Maxi 4, on the other hand, they use 3 springs on both trucks. Kinda also added the molded in writing, so it's a lot more realistic, while even the newer Athearn, they just left it blank. And if you compare the couplers, the newer Athearn has a standard McHenry coupler with a bottom shelf, while the older Athearn uses really bulky coupler. I'm not sure what's it called, but it is pretty chunky, especially compared side by side. The proportions became a lot more realistic. And while editing the video, I later looked at the manual and found out Athearn was using old Bachmann Easy Mate couplers, and apparently back then they used plastic instead of metal springs. And if you take a look at the bottom, the newer Athearns have brake beams. This detail is not present on the older one. The newer one also has these plastic inserts in the wheel, which again is on one side for insulation, but I don't really see much on the other car. Both sides are the same. Also, they have that train line hose hanging down, which is not on the old one, so yeah, Athearn definitely came far. So here's our first container, the Evergreen. So I asked Walthers if they could send me some containers, and this is one of them. It's pretty short at 20 foot, and at the bottom you can see it says Walthers. And to the side it has a serial number. There also is a small red box with dimensions, and then on the end with the doors, it's all molded in. And it's interesting, all the latches are facing towards each other. Then we have some container data and the EMC logo. There also are some black specks. They don't really come off, so probably some kind of paint splatter. Then here's the other side, the roof, and the other end, which does have that EMC logo, which stands for Evergreen Marine Corporation, which is a Taiwanese shipping company. And the logo is actually a bit different from my other Evergreen shipping containers. So next up we have the Mediterranean Shipping Company, or MSC, which it even says on the left, and they're actually the largest shipping company in the world, and it comes in this cool red and yellow livery, and it does have these little air vents at the top, the container number, and this is certified for the French Railways IC87, and here's the height. Then the other end has a container number, and here's the other side, about the same. And then here are the doors, which the latches do pop out, but it's actually all molded in. They just painted the outer edge of it, so it does give an illusion of depth. And here's a close-up view of the detail. And then here's a look at the roof, which they did add in the numbers on the edges. Then here's the bottom, says Walthers made in China. And it's interesting, they used a different font from the other Walthers. These shipping containers are actually different molds. You can see that Evergreen has these forklift pockets at the bottom, but it's just smooth on MSC. I actually didn't pay attention to this before, but there's actually these big slots on the sides, so the corrugation is different, as well as the style of the doors. The Evergreen one is a flat panel, doesn't have that corrugation, and this is where MSC has the forklift pockets. Alright, so next up we have Textainer Group Holdings, or just Tex. They're based in Bermuda. Then we have the other information, as well as the high cube markings at the very top. And it's a longer standard 40-foot container. And then here's a look at the doors. Very nice printing. Here's the other side. And on the end it says Tex period. And here's a look at the top where you can see these really obvious sprue points. Then the bottom is black with this slot on the end. And this is made in China. I did notice that there is a bit of paint missing on the edge. I think it went to this little part that sticks out. Alright, so I also got this 3-pack. So these are all HMM, Hyundai, Merchant Marine, and all of them come with unique container numbers. So if you take a look at one of them, they come in this reddish brown livery with the HMM logo in the middle, and the lines supposed to represent an ocean horizon with the sun peeking out. And to the side we have a KOBIC logo, stands for the Korea Ocean Business Corporation, owned by the South Korean government, which has a big stake in HMM. And here on the other side we've got a lot of little details, like this label that says it's super heavy. Then here's a look at the end, the other side, and here's the doors, very detailed. It's a view of the top and the bottom. Now one thing I noticed for these containers, for the bottom forklift pockets, the left side is alright, but the right side it's a little bit bumpy, not cut out all the way, so it could have been more uniform. Now let's test if the Walthers container works with the Athearn. Apparently it does not. The pin actually is slightly off, so it just barely misses the hole. And just in case that was a fluke, I also tried it with the Tex, and it's the same issue. Now the good thing about Walthers is that their holes are a lot bigger, so it's a lot more forgiving, and it looks like an oval shape compared to that circle on Athearn. So the Athearn container can kind of fit on the Walthers, but on a closer inspection it still kind of pops out, so it's not a perfect fit. And what about these smaller containers, which go on the bottom? You can stack them on top and they generally stay on, but again the fit is not perfect. Let's also do a little comparison with the Athearn versus the Walthers container. They're around the same dimensions, 40-foot high cubes, but still they're actually pretty different styles. The HMM has those forklift pockets, where it's just smooth on Hapag Lloyd. The door also has these 3 indentations, so the corrugation is totally different. And one advantage of Athearn is the rods are actually separately applied pieces, while Walthers is just molded in, but it's actually pretty convincing. I think you can only tell if you really zoom in and see there's like a wall. Athearn also included the black gaskets around the doors, which are not present on Walthers. And then on the roof, Athearn doesn't have sprue markings, but on Walthers you get 2 of them. They're artifacts from the molding process. The holes on the sides are also just molded in on Walthers, which is an actual hole on Athearn. And if you compare the bottom pins, the Walthers is a lot stubbier, while Athearn is much longer. I think that's one of the reasons why the Athearn container really sticks together compared to Walthers. And then if you look at the bottom, the Athearn container has that leveled out floor. Compare that with Walthers, where the floor kind of makes an indent in and the sidewalls stick out more. Also, you can see the ribs are a lot thicker on the Athearn, while it's thin on Walthers. And as for the weight, which one's heavier, the Athearn is just a tad bit heavier at 0.4 ounces more. So Walthers was nice enough to give me some more Intermodal Yard Pavement, but if you want to watch the full unboxing of it, you can watch my MeJack video. But in that video, I didn't really paint it, so I'm going to do it this time around. So I'm going to use some Vallejo surface primer and mix it with some thinner. Then the next day, I painted with some Vallejo cement gray. However, eventually I ran out of paint since I already used some of it previously for the crossing video, and I didn't feel like waiting a whole week to ship new paint. So I went to the Red Caboose in Manhattan, which is one of the very few hobby stores that still exist in New York City, but a lot of their stock is pretty old. But I came here for their paints. Unfortunately, the owner told me they don't carry Vallejo Air, so I had to pick another shade of gray. So I got this dark sea gray, but it's in model color, and you can see the tone is a bit cooler. Now since it's model color, it does require a lot more thinner, and I also mixed it with some flow improver that helps make the paint flow out easier. Although at first I still had some issues with the paint coming out smoothly, it'd make this squeaking sound. I would add thinner and more flow improver, but it didn't really help. It's also not great because flow improver delays the drying time. I later found out that I actually had to bump up the PSI, which is the pressure of the airbrush, so I put it around 25. So now it sprays much better. I also found it easier to mix the paint outside of the airbrush cup. You have a lot more control and it's less likely to spill. And between each step, I'm waiting 24 hours for them to dry. So the next coat is a gloss coat varnish, because after that I'm going to apply a dark wash. I'm using Ammo by Mig Dark Enamel Wash, and a gloss coat allows it to flow into the cracks without mixing with the underlying paint. Then I'm going to wait for the wash to dry for 30 to 40 minutes. Then I'm going to clean it up with some enamel thinner. So I just brushed it on the parts where I want to get rid of. Then I'm going to use a paper towel to pat it away and rub out the excess. Then we should have some nice panel lining. Right, so the last step, apply some matte varnish. This is just a clear coat to protect the model. Alright, so here it is in the original cement gray I was painting before, and I'm going to use this piece for the pavement on the tracks. And with the wash, you can see some really nice shading. It really pops out and brings out the detail. Here's an original piece I didn't paint, so you can see a side-by-side comparison, just the improvement. Alright, and then here is the actual Intermodal Yard Pavement, and I had to paint it in dark sea gray because that's the only paint I found in stock. So it's going to be darker than I originally planned for, but it's actually not bad. And the shop owner told me concrete can vary a lot in real life, and you really do need the wash to bring out these lines, or else it's just going to be flat looking, and it comes with a lot of these little drains. Alright, so here are all the panels that I've painted. I mean, this took forever to do. If you look at this pack, I just got loads and loads of them. You can see they are definitely not perfect. They're, random blobs, or accidentally smudging them. And these things, while drying, they tend to attract dust, and I don't think it helped that I used a lot of flow improver that delays the drying time, but from far away, it's actually not that noticeable. And here's a look at one of the smaller panels, and I didn't really paint the sides because when you're putting them together you don't really see them. And here you can imagine how a container would look like on the yard. And like the previous video, I plan to just put them on foam boards so they match the rail height.
Meh.
So for my final thoughts, the Athearn TTX Maxi-I, it's a great piece of rolling stock. Perfect if you're running intermodal trains because these are pretty common in real life. Even though it's under ready to roll, it's still very finely detailed with see-through etched metal walkways, tiny legible text, separately applied train lines and brake lines, way better than their Maxi III. It's also very easy to use, takes little effort to hook up the units together and insert in containers so you don't have to mess around with it worrying about a tight squeeze to cram it in. It was also interesting, it came with the Hapag Lloyd shipping containers, which are also pretty realistic, even with the holes on the sides, separately applied latches, and all the little labels. And the floor does feel solid and secure. You can even hang these containers upside down without it falling. You also can store the well cars without the containers in the box. I was kind of wondering about that. Now for the cons, the body is made of plastic, so it's going to be lighter and less durable than metal. I kind of feel like I could just crush it with my hands. It also doesn't roll the best, at least with an empty load, but I didn't really have any issues running it. And then for the Walthers containers and yard pavement, big thanks to Walthers for providing them. I think Walthers is definitely a great source of intermodal containers. They have such a large selection and they're decently detailed, and I had no idea there was going to be different variations in the 20-foot containers until I actually got them, so that's cool they're not all the same. And for the yard pavement, finally I got around to painting them, which was quite challenging because it was during a heat wave and I underestimated how much paint I needed. If you switch colors midway, even though they're both gray, it's practically like you have to start all over again, but in the end it's definitely worth it, and I learned a new skill of how to do panel lining for the first time. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you do, hit the like button, let me know what you think in the comments down below, subscribe for more, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye. So Walthers sent me a lot of other things like this 250 anniversary poster, which has some new livery trains, and an official Walthers mug, This Is How I Roll. They did not tell me they were sending all this. Now the biggest thing is their Titans of Steel trading cards. So these are basically collectible railroad trading cards. So here's Westinghouse, he invented the air brake for the trains, the Leviathan steam locomotive, the Milwaukee Road Cannonball, the center beam flat car, Kansas City Station, and other landmarks like this trestle bridge. And here's Union Pacific Big Boy, which is touring the country right now. And the last one's part of a puzzle. So the back faces of these cards, they have a little blurb talking about it. It's definitely educational, learning about like different trains and places. And they gave me a second set, so here are some more cards. Here we got the funnel flow tank car, never heard of that. So there's definitely a lot of cool, unique things you can learn about. The Iowa Traction Railway, some railroad tycoon guy, Sioux Line 1003, the famous San Francisco cable car, and these trash container trains, which I do find pretty cool. It's too bad it's not made in HO scale. I don't know what this is. And they lumped the E8 and E9 together. And here's the other puzzle piece. It's actually a picture of a model train. And these are actually Walthers Protos. So once you get all 9 cards, you can make a picture and finish off the C&O consist. So yeah, these are definitely educational and great if you're into card collecting, or it could be a nice gift that doesn't cost much.
I think it's snagged on that.